Welcome to the Explainer. Today we are diving into the fascinating chronological evolution of one of the absolute most recognizable brands on the planet. We're going to trace the exact professional milestones of Donald Trump, following his path from an outer borough real estate developer all the way to a ubiquitous reality television star. You know, whether you recognize his name from gleaming skyscrapers, tabloid covers, or the ballot box, the story of how that name became a global symbol, well, it's literally a masterclass in narrative control and media maneuvering. Let's get right into it. Let's kick things off with a quote straight from his book, The Art of the Deal, because this honestly serves as the ultimate thesis for this entire journey. He says, "I play to people's fantasies." Early on, he had this huge realization. The public actually wants to believe in something spectacular. They want to be sold a dream. And as you're going to see, every single business move, every tabloid leak, and every product launch was engineered around delivering exactly that fantasy to the public. So here's how we're going to break down this chronological arc. First, early real estate roots. Second, the Manhattan pivot. Third, mastering the tabloid media. Fourth, building a licensing empire. And finally, becoming a reality star. All right, starting off with part one, early real estate roots. To really understand the brand, we've got to go back to Brooklyn and Queens. That's where he learned the family business of housing from his father, a guy known as an obsessively hard worker who instilled a serious drive to win at absolutely all costs. Take a look at our timeline here. We're starting with a massive turning point in 1973. This was a moment that taught him a crucial lifelong lesson about facing controversy and shaping his own narrative, way before the skyscrapers or the TV cameras. So, what happened in 1973? Well, the Department of Justice hit Trump and his father with a massive federal lawsuit. The DOJ had actually sent undercover agents to Trump apartment complexes and alleged they found a systematic pattern of housing discrimination. They claimed managers were literally marking applications for minority renters and falsely telling them no units were available. Now, faced with all this federal pressure, most people would quietly settle, right? Not the 27-year-old developer. He furiously fought back by countersuing the U.S. government for a staggering $100 million. And guys, this brilliantly illustrates the very first rule of his emerging playbook. Even though the judge dismissed his countersuit, Trump eventually settled the DOJ case with zero admission of guilt. In his mind, that was a massive victory. It set a behavioral pattern we are going to see time and time again. Demand attention, fight back, never fold, and walk away controlling the story. Moving on to part two, the Manhattan pivot. So the scrutiny from that lawsuit, mixed with just a growing distaste for the unglamorous world of middle-income rentals, sparked a massive shift. Tired of the outer boroughs, he turned his sights across the river. While other investors were literally fleeing a fading, crumbling Manhattan in the 1970s, he looked at it and saw a golden opportunity in all that decay. Using his father's deep connections, reputation, and capital, he secured funding and unprecedented tax exemptions. And with those resources, he resurrected decaying properties, like the old Commodore Hotel and a Fifth Avenue department store, turning them into these glitzy, luxurious destinations. Which brings us to his signature project, Trump Tower. This building perfectly physicalized rule number 2 of his playbook. It wasn't just a building, you know? It was this physical expression of a fantastical image of wealth. I mean, we're talking indoor waterfalls, marble, gold everywhere, and a 3-story penthouse that looked straight out of a European palace. He was selling exclusivity and unapologetic excess directly to the public. It was basically a temple built to his own brand. Okay, let's look at part 3, mastering the tabloid media. By the mid-1980s, his Manhattan success gave him a huge platform, but he quickly realized that just being a successful developer wasn't enough. He needed to be famous. So he found his absolute greatest megaphone in the fiercely competitive New York City tabloids. Get this. He appeared on their front pages a staggering 87 times over 15 years. 87 times! And this was entirely by design. He purposefully fueled drama about his personal life, the divorces, the affairs, the wealth, just to maintain constant, unrelenting public attention. He effectively hacked the media ecosystem of the 1980s. It gets even crazier. He was so dedicated to managing his image that he'd actually disguise his own voice. He routinely called reporters using fake names like John Barron or John Miller to act as his own PR spokesperson. Seriously, he used these aliases to convince Forbes magazine he was worth $100 million, when in reality the estimate was closer to $5 million. This perfectly establishes rule number 3 of the playbook: perception is far more important than reality, because if people believe you're a massive winner, that belief literally becomes its own currency. This whole strategy culminated in a deep understanding of distraction. As he crudely but honestly noted in a 1991 Esquire interview, the actual substance of the reporting doesn't really matter if the optics are distracting enough. He realized super early on that negative press about casino bankruptcies or controversial business practices could easily just be washed away by tantalizing lifestyle distractions. He fundamentally cemented the belief that all press is good press, just as long as you're the center of the story. That brings us to part 4, building a licensing empire. As we move into the 90s, the developer actually transitioned away from traditional brick and mortar. Having spent a decade carefully crafting this larger-than-life image, he fully embraced his status as a ubiquitous symbol and just started cashing in on the name itself. Let's clearly define what was happening here through the concept of licensing. He wasn't spending his own money to build global towers anymore. Instead, he was simply permitting third parties to rent out his highly recognizable persona for pure profit. If a product failed, well, he kept the licensing fee and walked away. He was quite literally monetizing an aura. Just look at the sheer volume here. From airlines with gold-plated sinks to vacuum-sealed bottled water, a branded board game with his face on the money, ties, steaks, you name it. He proved he could attach his brand to virtually anything. He became a master marketer, proving that the American middle class was super eager to buy a piece of the prestige he had spent decades projecting. Now, as one of his own executives noted, this relentless branding shifted his public persona from a serious businessman into almost a cartoon character. But here is what's absolutely vital to understand. This was not a mistake. This avalanche of products successfully sold middle-class America a Disneyland-esque version of elite wealth. It was relatable, it was loud, and it was absolutely everywhere. And finally, part 5, becoming a reality star. Here's the thing though, relying on your name only works if it keeps its shine. By the early 2000s, with casinos facing bankruptcy and a lot of those branded ventures quietly failing, the brand was definitely losing its luster. So in 2004, he teamed up with reality TV producers, including the creator of Survivor, to create The Apprentice. On network television, he was cast in the exact role he had been preparing for his entire life. The ruthless, decisive, infallible billionaire presiding over a vast empire. The show magically edited out the bankruptcies and the failures, presenting audiences with only the ultimate fantasy of corporate dominance. And wow, was it a smash hit! Over 14 incredibly successful seasons, The Apprentice completely rejuvenated his persona. It turned his catchphrase, "You're fired," into a massive cultural phenomenon. More importantly, it beamed his meticulously crafted image of absolute authority directly into living rooms across America. It made him a household name to a completely new generation of working-class viewers and fans. Which brings us to the final fascinating takeaway of this explainer. You see, this mastery of showmanship, narrative control, and brand licensing didn't just save his career. The playbook of demanding attention, fighting every slight, and selling an unapologetic fantasy laid the exact groundwork for his entry into the largest, most consequential stage of all. It leaves us with a really provocative question. When a media playbook is this effective at hacking human psychology, what is the ultimate limit of the fantasy you can sell? Think about that as you observe the media landscapes around you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.